For those of you who don't know, I make a living supposedly forecasting changes in the economic environment and in the financial markets. And with the caveat that I've been doing this 45 years, and between the pandemic and the war and the crazy policy response in the United States and worldwide, this is the hardest environment I've ever encountered to try and have any confidence in a forecast 6 to 12 months ahead. There are brewing issues when you get the price of oil doing what it's doing historically, and when you get interest rates doing what they're doing historically, and it becomes a global phenomenon with tightening liquidity, and you've got war. The odds of a global recession and a change in the macroeconomy are about as high and as severe as I've seen them in decades. 3 questions. Are you seeing any sign of that in your commercial enterprise business in the United States? B, are you seeing it treated differently in Europe because they're dealing with gas prices? They're down a little the last couple of weeks, but the equivalent of like $300 oil. And 3, what does it mean for Palantir where we get a recession, in other words, a bad economic environment globally, but with all this crazy geopolitical stuff going on at the same time?
Yeah, so the crazy weird thing about Palantir is we are heavily diversified by geography historically. Now, one of the dangerous things for Palantir is just how well we're doing in America. So we went from a business that was majority outside of America in 2019 to a business that in 2 years will be 70% US based.
Wait, you went from, I'm supposed to know this, I'm an investor. You went from less than half in America to 70% in
2
America
years,
in
we
2
will
years?
No, in 2 years from now, we will be a 70% US business.
And will that increase come more from government or commercial?
The commercial business has been doubling every year. This year, if you include Canada, it might double, but it went from a small integral 50 to 100 to 200, and now and this is, by the way, ex-back. So it's not being driven by inorganic revenue. The US business crossed the $1 billion mark alone this year. So this is a big milestone. First, we crossed the $1 billion mark as a company, and then the US business has grown 61% annually, so CAGR the last 3 years, from like just under $300 million business to $1 billion business, LTM, so the last 12 months. So it's like this is like the interesting question for Palantir is what the fuck is going on in the US? Why is this business?
It's the 12-year-olds.
It's the 12-year-olds. But and so the general thing is there's these macro conditions. I think obviously in many ways the US on energy and other things is better positioned than Europe. But the key difference for us is how do cultures respond to certain exogenous pressures, and what for all the things that look weird outside to people looking into the U.S. What is amazing about the U.S. is the adaptive ability of U.S. companies and U.S. institutions. Obviously, some things take too long, and there are things that we don't like, and they're corrosive. We sued the U.S. government twice because of what we thought was unfair practices, and there's a lot. But the U.S. we came with kind of products that, first with PG, which was a way of modeling data and a way of doing it where you could segment the data and still find people who are doing bad things. And then with Foundry, which is a completely antithetical to the market way of approaching software. And so instead of selling a sliver of a piece of software with literally 5 to 10 salespeople per half of engineer you have that probably couldn't get a job at Palantir, we led with an engineer focus and went for like the full value proposition. But in any case, leaving that aside, this was something that every single analyst, every single person who's tasked with understanding the market, so the VC community, the academic community said no one would ever buy. And America is quite willing to say, yeah, we wouldn't have bought that yesterday. We might not buy it today, but we'll look at it and then we'll quickly adapt and begin buying it. And what's also interesting about America, just at a more micro level, is in every other culture in the world, when you sell, you get a niche. So you say software for automotive, software for oil and gas. In fact, we're doing that. In America, by and large, people are like, well, we just want to see if this will work for us. So there's like, people are very willing to adapt to what works for them, independent of legitimacy criteria from other things. And this is, and from people that they don't normally know or would not interact with. So there's that part, just as a structural thing, is very advantageous for us, particularly in America. Less advantageous for, a lot of companies adjust for dollar because super strong and make excuses. But in reality, Europe is weaker for us than in America, even though if you adjusted for dollar, it's still by normal standards like 25% or in the high above 20 and perhaps even 30%. But what is it's adaptive. Now, what's very good for us in general on the macro conditions, including outside of America, is this energy crisis, inflation, geopolitical turmoil will break your internal IT system. And in fact, what is driving our sales outside of America is simply that if you're a large manufacturer and all of a sudden you have to repurpose where you're building your pumps because you can't get them from Ukraine, and maybe you believe things you purchase in China you won't be able to supply to the U.S. market. So most European companies have two basic markets, U.S. and China, and they're worried that in the near future you will have to build a product that doesn't have supplies from the other. So that's a massive overhauling of your operational infrastructure. And because it's a low legitimacy environment, you're going to have to show bureaucrats in both countries exactly where the products came from visually, and that completely maps into this vertical and horizontal integration problem that maps towards a disjoined set of geopolitical conditions where people don't trust each other.